Raider Nation, it is time to talk about your favorite subject. That, of course, Las Vegas Raiders football. Thanks for being with us back here on Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. We do appreciate you. We get so much joy and entertainment and feedback from all of you, and we just appreciate it. And the support you've given us continues to blow me away. So thank you for that. And we appreciate you being with us. And I don't do this alone. Nope. We are partners, and that is my good friend Moe Moton, who now joins us. Mo, of course, national writer for Bleacher Report, and also is the Raiders columnist up on sportsnot.com. All right, second day in a row. We talked yesterday, got some feedback. People thought I was a little negative yesterday. I apologize if that's the way you felt, but maybe I had a tough day. I don't remember, because I it's all about today and tomorrow, Mo, not about yesterday, right?
Stop being a negative Nathan, Scott. Be more positive like Mo, all right? Let's just talk about the good things.
And it's funny because we had one of the guys I really like. I like Danny Heifetz, who was on yesterday from The Ringer and Spotify. But Danny, Danny's going to tell it like it is. He does not hide. And so Danny had some things to say about the Raiders in his All Index that we talked about with him yesterday. And I think some Raider fans didn't like it because it wasn't exactly perfect. Oh, the Raiders are going to be awesome, right? And that's okay. I understand. As a fan, there's been enough negativity around the Raiders. I didn't think he was negative, but you and I tend to look at things a little more differently than perhaps some of our listeners. And that's cool, though. I'll tell you what, we get good feedback when we don't do something well, or if people don't like something. I love, Mo, that our listeners tell us, because sometimes we disagree and we say, okay, well, that's just a choice we made and we're sticking to it and we'll see you later. But overall, I love it, because people tell us what they like and what they don't like. And, we want to deliver an entertaining and insightful show. And so it's great when we get those listeners to tell us how they think about things.
Yeah, of course. Both sides of the coin are great because your feedback helps improve the show. Just about Jenny Heifetz's piece, I just felt like basically the Raiders are ranked 8th, so they're one of the teams that are going all in. So I didn't see it too much as a negative. I think the problem people had a issue with was the fact that he said maybe they may be undermanned when it comes to other teams in the division. So that's a sensitive subject.
And that's obviously very sensitive because when you talk about the AFC West and you talk about the Chiefs and the Chargers and the Broncos, people don't want to hear that. And so I get it. And the whole bazooka and the gun thing, that was a couple people DM'd me after the show ran on Wednesday morning. And they said, that what is that all about? And so I get it. It's totally fine. People are really happy right now, very excited about the Raiders, and they should be. I'm not in any way. And on this show, we've been very positive, but also objective. So we try to stay that way. But thank you to all of the listeners for your feedback. We appreciate that. You tell us when you love it and you tell us when you don't. And that's great. That's the way it should be. It's an open line of communication here. So here we are. It's over, Mo. Camp is over. The Raiders concluded their practices with the New England Patriots. And of course, the news of the day, all we saw from the beat guys on the ground, from some national sources that were there. Of course, the whole Boston media was there covering the Patriots practice. Imagine that when you had to get the assignment. Oh, we got to go to Vegas for the week to cover the Patriots. Yeah. They're out there enjoying themselves. But all we heard about was Davante Adams dominating. Derek Carr, Davante Adams connecting on passes, beautiful passes as they've been described to us. Of course, we don't have any film or any video to see, but I'll take their word for it. These are the people, the men and women who cover the teams, and that was coming from both sides. So it wasn't just like Raider reporters or others out there telling us how great the Raiders did. We were hearing it from everybody. But isn't that what we expected?
Yeah, it's pretty much what we expected to hear with Waller, and also Hunter Renfro had a really good couple of sessions against the Patriots. There was one Patriot reporter, Greg Bedard, I believe, of the Boston Sports Journal. He was really hard on the Patriots. Like, he was saying basically, he said Tuesday was the Patriots' worst offensive showing of camp. And that could be partially because the Patriots' offense is disoriented. That could be partially because the Raiders' offense actually playing well. I saw Jayon Brown in one of the clips had an interception. I believe Jonathan Abram had an interception on Wednesday, but he had it with the second or third team. But overall, I think when you look at the two sides, the two teams, the Patriots and the Raiders got the best of that matchup in joint practices.
Absolutely. We also heard about the Raiders' offensive line dominating against the Patriots' defense in practice. So that was other news that kind of trickled out about that. But again, as you said, I think the Patriots media overall has been very hard on them. I say hard on them with an asterisk, right? Because I wasn't there. I don't know. But you're right. The mood around the Patriot team seems to be very hardcore. Boy, this is going to be tough. They're not looking great. But then again, it's Bill Belichick. Do we honestly believe that he's going to go out there? And I know that's players on the field, but is he going to show anything? I know him and Josh McDaniels, all the video of them hanging out and yucking it up on the sideline. And of course, Bill Belichick with all his praise of the Raiders practice facility, and the Las Vegas media talked to him, and he actually seemed to be more at ease being there, even though his media pool was there. Talking to the Las Vegas media was a little more open. Of course, he doesn't say a ton, but he seemed to be a little more talkative than he is usually when he's back home.
Yeah, I also saw a clip of Bill Belichick walking around with a title belt. I don't know what to make of that.
The UFC.
Yes, he seemed pretty jovial.
Yeah, I think they went over to the UFC's headquarters in Las Vegas. They have a training center. I think that's where that was, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, he seems to be kind of just living it up in Las Vegas.
I was going to say, Vegas brings out the best in Bill Belichick. Who would have thought we would get 2 smiles out of Bill Belichick in 2 joint practices? He kind of cracked a smile when he was talking about the Raiders facility. It was a Taj Mahal of football facilities.
Yeah.
And then, as I said, with the title belt, you got to see a little bit of Bill Belichick's personality, which is shocking to see in small snippets even.
It is, and I will tell you, I've only met and been around Bill Belichick once. It was when I was in the boxing business, and I went down with one of our fighters, Deontay Wilder, the former heavyweight champion. We went down to Phoenix for the Super Bowl because he was doing a bunch of stuff, and I was with him down there. And we went to a restaurant, and that night there was a party by NBC. NBC was our broadcast partner for boxing. And they were having this big party, and so we went to this party. It was at a restaurant, and Bill Belichick was there with his wife. And he comes out of this booth. It was like one of those booths where they have the curtains for dining. And all of a sudden the curtain opens up and out comes Bill Belichick and Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth and Belichick's wife and somebody else. I'm not sure who it was. They came out, and Bill Belichick, I got introduced to him really quickly with Deontay. He was talking to Deontay about boxing. And I mentioned a couple of things with football, and I mentioned to Collinsworth at the time his son was playing at Notre Dame. Of course, I'm a Notre Dame fan, so we talked about that a little bit. But Belichick was very at ease. He was very funny. I mean, he had a really good sense of humor talking to Deontay about just stuff in general, including boxing and football and all of that. And so that was my experience with him. So to see him in his normal mode, it's different, right? And it just goes to show you that in the business, especially football, I know it's football, but it's also entertainment. And so people sometimes have a role to play, and that's certainly the role he plays with the media usually. But we get back to Davante Adams, Mo. And I want to talk about him too, because there's a couple things that came out. The Pivot podcast was a great interview with him. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you go watch it. But Davante Adams, we know how good he's been. We know how good he is. Here's my question for you. When you look at him on this Raiders team with Derek Carr, a top 10 quarterback, I know some of these rankings have come out recently and don't put him in the top 10. I put him there now because of what's around him. I know that's not earned yet because he's got to go out and play. But when you look at the situation that they're in, and with Davante Adams in the Josh McDaniels offense, just how good can he be coming into a situation where he no longer has the Hall of Famer quarterback in Aaron Rodgers there? He's on a new team. What do you think about him and his role in Las Vegas? Is he going to be able to live up to the Davante Adams of Green Bay?
I hope Brett Favre is listening to this, but yes, he is. He's going to be fine. Again, he may not get as many targets as he got last year with the Green Bay Packers when he didn't have a number 2 guy, a solid number 2 receiver behind him. But he's still going to be effective in the red zone. I still think he's going to have 12 to 14 touchdowns of those inside the 20-yard line. But he's going to also open up the field for Hunter Renfro and Darren Waller once he's healthy again. We'll talk about that later. But he's going to help others. And then he's going to help himself to some touchdowns, and I would say about 12 to 1,300 receiving yards. So Davante Adams will still be the Pro Bowl All-Pro player that you've known with the Green Bay Packers, catching passes from Derek Carr. And they saw reporters and spectators who were there at the joint practices got to see a little bit of that Tuesday and Wednesday.
No doubt. And it's interesting. You mentioned Hunter Renfro. I saw somebody retweet, I don't know who it was, saying that they felt Hunter Renfro is going to lead the team in receptions, yards, and touchdowns, which I find hard to believe with Davante Adams. Even if Davante Adams' targets go down, I still think that as much as I love Hunter, that's no shade thrown at Hunter. Of course, a former Silver and Black Today guest, a weekly guest on our show when we were on Raider Nation Radio. But to me, Davante Adams is a whole different level of wide receiver. And if you look at that and what he's done and what he said on the Pivot podcast, I want to read this. That's why if you're watching us on YouTube, I'm looking to the side here because I'm reading this. On the Pivot podcast, they asked him how he preps. And I love this visual, Mo. I thought it was one of the best visuals I've heard from a top-tier wide receiver. And they asked him how he approaches the game. And he said, I got a plan every time I get to the line based on what you're doing, i.e. the defense. And I put my Terminator mask on. And if you're right there in front of me, I drop down the scroll. If you remember the Terminator, when you're looking through the Terminator's eyes, the computer comes up and you can see that. And he says, I get 3 ideas, something I want to do based off, and this is pre-snap. So that's when plan B kicks in based on what you do. Because I'm going to come off, I'm going to get patented, I'm going to skip off and kind of hop off the ball, and it's really an illusion. So there you go. He gives a little bit of an insight into how he approaches the game when he gets to the line. And we all know how good and how much he dominates at the line, starting off and getting prepared in pre-snap and then go. Talk about that and that visualization and what that says about Davante Adams.
Well, number one, it says he studies a lot of film and he knows his opponent. Football, people think football is just you throw the ball out there and you beat your guy one-on-one. When they talk about film study, knowing your opponent, knowing the defender that's across from you, that's what Davante Adams is into. And he knows how to get off the line of scrimmage and beat that opponent, whether it's a bigger cornerback, faster cornerback, physically get the cornerback, a guy who may be a little more handsy at the line of scrimmage, a guy who may sag off the line of scrimmage and give him some cushion. He has a plan for whoever it is across from him, and that's why his release, his get off, as so to speak, is so great off the line of scrimmage.
But when you talk about Davante Adams, we're talking about how great he is. I mean, top 2 receiver. I mean, you can make him 1 or 2. I heard a discussion on NFL Network. They were going between Cooper Kupp and Davante Adams and going back and forth with that discussion. I'm not here to do that, but he's definitely a top 2 wide receiver in my view. When you look at his game and what he's able to do so well, is there anything, because every player, I don't care who you are, and the great ones always will tell you this themselves. They'll say, I can get better. With Davante Adams, if you look at his game today, what would you say he can do to get better?
I wouldn't say he can get better at this because this is more innate, but he's not a burner. So he's not going to get behind the defense with speed. He may not get a quick step on you. Like I said, he wins at the beginning of his route. He's not a Tyreek Hill, obviously. But as far as like what he can get better at, I actually think he's the best receiver in football. Now, of course, he's going to tell you there are fine technical things that he needs to tune up on, and he probably knows that more than I do, even if I watch him every game and watch a few of his games. But I've been watching with the Packers, and I would say he's probably the best all-around receiver that's not a burner. And even if you want to compare him to a Tyreek Hill who's dynamic and can beat you for 50 yards, Davante Adams can do the same thing. He's just not going to do it with speed.
Right. He's going to do it in that first jump off the line, which is why I thought the description of his Terminator helmet was so cool, because he's so good off the line. And as the play kicks off, that it's just remarkable. So he creates that space and he creates the ability to get open and get downfield without that, just breakneck speed. It's pretty remarkable. Now, we talked about Derek Carr. And Davante Adams, obviously their history, people are counting a lot on the fact that they have that chemistry. But in that Pivot interview, he also said, look, I'm not here just so people say, oh, isn't it nice that Derek and Davante are so close, such great friends. He wants to win a championship. It's all about a trophy for him. But coming over and Aaron Rodgers and what he was able to do versus Derek Carr, How much of an adjustment is it going to be for him? I mean, I know they're working on it. It looks good in practice, obviously, because they've been lighting it up this week in Vegas. But what's the difference for him as a receiver having a quarterback that has a little bit different skill set?
I guess it will be timing, but they practiced it and they worked together during the offseason. So I wouldn't expect a major adjustment there. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can ask any reporter that's been at camp, that's been at these practices, the Derek Carr Davante Adams connection has been money. I don't expect any hitch in his transition from Green Bay to Las Vegas. Whenever you have a quarterback and a wide receiver that are already familiar with each other and that already work together in the offseason,
It's huge.
chances are that connection is going to be lightning as soon as they come out of the gate.
No doubt. And I think that's why a lot of the national narrative I've heard is kind of BS about Davante Adams will fall back a little because he doesn't have Aaron Rodgers anymore. And I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think necessarily I mean, I guess you look at it, or fans will look at it as a knock against Derek Carr, but you're talking about Aaron Rodgers. It's a different animal there. But I don't see any fall off there, because I think Derek Carr gets the ball where he needs to, and I think Davante Adams he does a lot of that work to get open, and that relationship is so vital. We talked about it over the last couple of years when Henry Ruggs came in, when other receivers came in, that was the most important thing between the quarterback and the wide receiver. Now, I mentioned Hunter Renfro earlier, Mo, and what does Davante Adams' presence mean for Hunter Renfro in his role in that slot, and with his skill set, especially in that shorter to intermediary part of the field where Hunter Renfro's been so good?
Yeah, so Hunter Renfro may be able to attack the field now and not see a safety over the top, because that safety is going to be paying attention to Davante Adams. So Davante Adams is going to get bracketed. He's going to get double coverage. And as I said earlier, that's going to open up the field for Hunter Renfro in the middle of the field. That's going to open up Darren Waller in the seams. So they'll benefit from just having Davante Adams' presence, just him being on the field, knowing that you have to know where number 17 is, helps everyone else. And Hunter Renfro last year probably saw some double teams, as he was the best wide receiver on the field for the Raiders. And now the field's going to open up for him, and he'll be able to rack up more yards after the catch this year with Davante Adams on the outside.
And that's what's so remarkable about his talent, about Adams' talent, because, like you said, he's not the burner, right? The burner is a guy, usually the safety has to watch that guy who can go vertical. When you talk about the differences between him and like a Tyreek Hill, although I think Davante Adams overall, even though Hill is very dynamic, Adams clearly a better receiver. And the fact that they have to pay attention to him without that speed speaks to the talent he has. Mo, we'll expand the conversation now a little bit. Talk about the wide receivers now. We look at this young group who's really done well in the preseason. To me, it's one of the things that I look to in rewatching the games. I watched the last two games again this past weekend after the Dolphins game. And what's been remarkable to me is how good that unit has been. Not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And you got some young guys out there. But when you look at Keelan Cole, Mac Hollins, Tyron Johnson, and DJ Turner, they all have done really, really well. And I think that competition, we've talked about it on this show, right? That we felt like this is going to go into the season. You might have a rotation of guys. But let's start with Keelan Cole coming over and having the experience he's had in the league and what you've seen from him in the preseason. How do you think that when in that room with the competitiveness going on, how do you look at Keelan Cole and what his role could be with this team based on the 3 games you've seen?
I think he'll be a lesser version of Nelson Aguilar, where he can give you a big play when you need it. Because he's had a couple of big plays over the last 2 preseason games against the Vikings and against the Dolphins. And I think I wouldn't say he solidified his spot in the roster, but I expect him to make the roster and probably have more catches than Mac Hollins, even though we probably can figure Mac Hollins is safe. He didn't suit up against the Dolphins, so that probably means they're just saving him for the season.
Right.
But between Mac Hollins and Keelan Cole, I think Keelan Cole is going to have more catches and more yards, simply because he has, as you mentioned, he has that experience playing a bigger role. So I'm not saying he's going to put the same numbers as Nelson Aguilar had in 2020, but when you need a guy to give you a 15, 16, 17, maybe 20 yarder downfield, Keelan Cole can do that. The interesting conversation comes down to who the Raiders keep between Billy, Tyron Johnson, and DJ Turner. And right now I have Tyron Johnson slightly ahead of DJ Turner. If the Reds keep 5 wide receivers, that would mean DJ Turner goes to the practice squad. But if they keep 6, they can keep both Tyron Johnson and DJ Turner.
Yeah, and Johnson is that guy too, I think, who can give you the big play, right? And he's a guy who I've been impressed with. DJ Turner, no question, has played well too, especially the last game as well. But to me, Johnson he's got that it factor for me at that role, with the ability to break it open as well, and certainly a guy that I'm going to keep an eye on. And I think you're right. I think he'll make the roster unless something crazy happens in between, which I don't expect. Mo, you had talked to me as we were getting ready for the show about the running back situation. Let's talk about that a little bit and some of the thoughts you have there.
Yeah, a lot of people on Twitter have asked, do I think Britton Brown is going to make it, or they either push back on my running back depth chart that I tweeted. I had Josh Jacobs and Zamir White as the 1-2 punch at the top of the depth chart. Then I had Amir Abdullah in the James White pass catching role. Then I had Brandon Bolden, who's going to share the pass catching role with Amir Abdullah, but also play a lot of special teams and kind of be a special teams captain. So a lot of people said, well, where's Britton Brown? He's been playing well the last 2 games. Why do you not have him on the depth chart? Because a lot of people brought the Patriots kept 5 running backs when they initially finalized their 50-man roster last year. And I did some digging. I did a lot of research on this, and it turns out that the Patriots only had 1 quarterback on their final roster going into last season because they cut Cam Newton and Jarrett Stidham went on PUP, and Jarrett Stidham didn't become active until week 10. So with only 1 quarterback on the depth chart, they had extra space to keep a guy elsewhere. And this is why you saw the extra running back. J.J. Taylor was the 5th running back on the Patriots depth chart, but he didn't play week 1. He was inactive. He did play the following week, but he only played 5 total games that year. So really the Patriots had a rotation of 4 backs. They had Damian Harris, they had Ramondre Stevenson, they had James White for 3 games. Then he got hurt, missed the rest of the season. So then Brandon Bolden moved up a slot. And then J.J. Taylor had some games, as I said, a handful of games, 5 he played. So, but again, basically 4 running backs. So I think this is what you're going to see with the Raiders, as I said. Jacobs, Zamir White, Amir Abdullah, Brandon Bolden. A lot of people don't think Brandon Brown is going to clear waivers, that they think someone else is going to pick him up, and that may happen. But as I said in the previous show, be careful falling in love with the running back who runs for a bunch of yards in the preseason. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to land on the roster. We saw it with Chris Warren.
Yep, Chris Warren is the guy, and Murph brings that up every time we do a show with him, and he's right. He's right. And I think as well, you have a situation where we talked about this throughout the preseason. The Raiders are going to have final cuts when they do the final cuts, and you're going to have guys and you're going to say, oh man, I can't believe they cut him. Because again, we do, as fans, we fall in love with guys because they go out and we're rooting for them. I think that's where it comes from. It comes from, especially a young guy, you're rooting for them. And they've done well. And so you feel like, okay, they've earned a spot, or I can't believe they let them go. But that's a good thing, because that tells you that you're bringing in good talent and you're creating a level of competition that makes the entire team better. So that's a very, very good thing. Okay, we are up against our first break. When we come back, we are going to switch gears a little bit. And I'm going to ask the question, and this is out there now, is Alex Leatherwood on the trading block? Really? We'll talk about that, as well as a GM, a former GM in the NFL, said that he made the worst cut he's ever made, and it just happens to be somebody that's currently on the Raiders roster. So we'll talk about that when we get back. Do us a favor, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. If you haven't already done that, make sure you do it wherever you can, wherever you get your podcast. That's where you can find us. Also, we're up on YouTube. You can see the show up on YouTube. Subscribe there. Hit the notifications bell so you don't miss a show, so you can join Mo and I and watch us as we pontificate on Raiders football. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to Silver and Black Today. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Thanks for being with us. Moe Moton, Scott Gulbransen. We are here to talk Raiders football, and we appreciate you being here on this Thursday. Yes, we had a show yesterday. We have a show today. And tomorrow, I want to remind everybody, one of the things that Mo and I love doing is our mailbag show. We have another mailbag show with some more great questions from all over the world. Yes, we get questions from international Raider Nation as well, so we're going to address that. Make sure you tune in for that one. Tomorrow morning, it'll also be up on YouTube Friday morning as well. And then after the game on Friday, tomorrow, we will have our post-game show where Murph from Raiders Fan Radio joins us. He is the voice of the fan and always has great reaction to the game. Mo, I love the mailbag stuff. We continue to get great questions.
Continue to get great questions from a lot of loyal listeners, so we appreciate that. And quick note, I think Murph is actually going to be on site for that Patriots-Raiders game, if I'm not mistaken, so that's going to be fun.
He is. That might be interesting because I don't know, and I don't want to cast any dispersions on Murph because I don't know if he enjoys adult beverages, but he's going to be in the stands in Las Vegas, and he's going to do it from his phone. So we will have Murph as a live correspondent, and I'm sure he won't be alone. I'm sure there's going to be some Raider Nation crazies there, so that's going to be a blast. So don't miss the post-game show. Right after the game, we'll be live on YouTube, and then you can, of course, if you can't catch us on YouTube live, you can catch us that same night as the podcast will go up on the feed. So if you subscribe, you'll get it right after the game, and you can listen to it as you either get some shut-eye, as you get lay down, and you're all geared up after the Raiders notch another win maybe in the preseason, but make sure you do that as well. Okay, Mo, a report out today from PFF, I should say a report out yesterday on Wednesday, and I'm going to this one from Doug Kyde from Pro Football Focus, said that perhaps Alex Leatherwood, who we've talked about ad nauseum, could be a trade candidate. Here's what he said. Quote, Leatherwood is currently starting for the Raiders in training camp, and he's actually benched during his last Vegas preseason game against the Dolphins. He's played into the second half of each of the Raiders' past 2 preseason games, which usually is not a good thing. And perhaps there could still be a team interested enough to trade for him in the second year of his rookie contract. Mo, what do we make of that? I mean, look, there's no concrete evidence. It's not like there's rumors about that everywhere, but this sort of came out on Wednesday, and suddenly you're hearing Vinny Bonsignor, my former colleague and the reporter at the RJ who covers the Raiders, talk about, hey, they could do one of two things. They could keep him, they could bench him, they could move him to guard. I wonder where I've heard that before, and then perhaps they could even let him go. The chances of the Raiders either trying to move him or let him go, what should we all think of that?
First of all, I want to say Vincent Bonsignor, the Las Vegas Review-Journal, got my hopes up because he unsolicitedly, I didn't say anything to Vinny. He quote tweeted me. He said, "You may get your wish as far as Alex Leatherwood moving to guard." Now, I was excited about that not because I think Alex Leatherwood was an guard or anything, but I felt like he had some good stretches as a guard last season when he moved after week 4. Now, Vinny also put out a report later on Wednesday saying, as you just mentioned, he could be moved to guard, he could be traded or cut. Now, I think the first action is to try to trade him if you're the Raiders, because they gave him a chance at right tackle. It hasn't worked out well for him.
Right.
But this regime, it doesn't have any ties to him because they didn't draft him 17th overall in the 2021 draft, right? So they may look at Leatherwood as he's not a good fit for their system. And if they can't find a trade partner, my guess is if they don't see anything from him at guard, then they let him go. Or they feel like, because I'm sure he's taken some reps at guard at practice, just not a significant amount to talk about. But, you know, these offensive linemen, they move around, they play different positions. So if they feel like they saw a little something at guard and they can salvage him a little bit, they will move him to guard. Because I think personally that's his not natural position, but I think that's where he will see the most growth. But I think the first mode of action is to let's see what we can get for him. Let's just put the ticker out there.
Sure.
What can we get a third or fourth round pick for him? And I think if the Raiders can get an early round pick, which I highly doubt, if they can get a 4th round pick, maybe they make that move even with a 4th round pick. But if they feel he's not a fit for the system period at all, whether at guard or tackle, then your only mode of action is to move him or cut him.
And it's interesting. People always go to the fact that they have to pay him. So I think he's due about $11 million. It's 1.3 this year, $2 million next year, and 2.6 in 2024. So from that perspective, remember, I think people misunderstand, and I don't blame them because the salary cap can be very confusing. But as Danny mentioned on yesterday's show, cash is a motivator. If you have cash, you can get around, basically. It's funky accounting to get around the salary cap. You can do that in certain cases. So if you have to absorb that and you're going to go get somebody else, there's interesting ways and creative ways to deal with that. But if they were to let him go, my guess is somebody picks him up, and the Raiders are not on the hook for all of it, right? So if somebody picks him up, the Raiders will recoup some of that. Now, if he clears waivers and nobody picks him up, then that's another interesting thing. I don't think there's got to be somebody else out there in the NFL who had him rated on their draft card. It's not that Alex Leatherwood drafted himself too high. Again, this goes back to the previous regime who ran the Raiders with Mike Mayock and John Gruden. They overdrafted him, perhaps. And if that's the case, that's not the player's fault. That's where I think, too, and I've been critical of him as well based on his play. I think people get caught up in the fact that this guy hasn't performed. When he was asked to switch positions, he wasn't a natural right tackle. Okay, so that's not necessarily on him. He hasn't been able to do it. You put him back at guard. Mo, if he's playing guard against the Patriots tomorrow night, that doesn't really tell us anymore either, right? Because that could be they're going to see how he does. If he does well, that could increase his trade value, or it could convince them to keep him as well, right?
Yeah, I think that's the litmus test. If he plays guard against the Patriots, they're going to see, okay, if he's really good at the position or if he plays well, shows well, maybe we can keep him around and just move his, take him back inside and hopefully he grows there. But if he's a disaster at guard, just like he was a tackle, then I think it has to be a trade or a cut. And that's going to sound, if the Raiders cut Alex Leatherwood, the takes against the Raiders are going to be hot because people are going to come at the Raiders and say, oh, look at the Raiders draft card. Look at what they did under John Gruden. And I get it. Gruden didn't brought in some good players. Max Crosby, Hunter Renfro, Darren Waller. But he had a lot of misses. And you can't run from that. And I think the Patriots came in, well, not the Patriots, but Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler came in thinking, okay, we'll see what we can do with Alex Leatherwood. And if worst comes to worst, if he doesn't fit in our system, if he doesn't pan out, then we can move him. But I find it, before you go, Scott, I find it interesting that two people on the show criticized Alex Leatherwood and said he may not start. And I know a lot of people in the live chat had pushed back on that. And they were saying we were too hard on Alex Leatherwood. Now, the narrative, you see everywhere you go, Alex Leatherwood is trash. He needs to be cut. And a lot of people are going to option C already, which is just let him go and cut your losses. Now, I would say that the Raiders may not have a problem doing that. You rent out the dead cap money that they will owe him. They let go of Kenyon Drake, and they still owe him $3.6 million. So they're not afraid to eat a little bit of cap money every year if it's not an exorbitant amount. It's Cleveland Farrell's cap money that I worry about, but that's a whole different subject. But back to
we
Leatherwood.
haven't got there yet.
Right, we haven't got there yet. But back to Leatherwood, I think, again, I think the first mode of action is to see what you can get for him. And if you can't get anything for him and he's not a fit, then he's cut. And then it makes headlines and Raiders fans are going to want to cover their ears because people are going to talk about how bad the Gruden Mayock regime was at drafting.
And that's why, to me, too, Mo, there's no downside other than the financial piece of it. There's no downside for McDaniels and Ziegler to cut him loose because they didn't bring him in the first place. It's not, yes, the Raiders get the criticism, but it's really going to be on Gruden. It's not going to be on McDaniels and Ziegler that they couldn't get him to perform. It's going to be on the previous team. And the other question is, you look at the guard position. You look at Dylan Parham, a draft pick by Dave Ziegler, who's played really well. He's played at guard. He shows promise there. And so they might be a little more apt to want to play him there and see how he pans out versus Alex Leatherwood. And then you have to ask mentally, too, because we've all been in the situation, and you and I have talked about this on the show before. Sometimes a change of scenery. He started off in Las Vegas, has been very disappointed. There's been a lot of negativity around him from fans, and the media coverage has been, I wouldn't call it negative, it's just been truthful that he hasn't been able to perform. So it could be a situation too where they sit down with him and say, hey, listen, we can put you at guard and we can work you in, and we'll see if you can work your way into the rotation. Or they might sit him down and say, listen, here's what we're thinking. Do you want to stay here? We have a possibility of moving, or we could release you. I think the player has some input, don't you?
Yeah, but there's a quick note, and I tweeted this after Leatherwood had that awful game against the Dolphins. I said, lost in all of this Alex Leatherwood criticism is that he's actually a pretty decent run blocker. And as I said, if you move him inside, he's still going to have to improve his pass blocking. But he's just, people are now framing him as he's going to be out of the NFL in a year or two. He's not even an NFL player. And I say pump the brakes on that. If a team can use him in run blocking and use him well, he can be serviceable. But back to your point about Dylan Parham, and there's a note that I should have made in our previous show. He actually started over John Simpson at left guard against the Dolphins. Yep. And he also started over John Simpson at left guard during the joint practices against the Patriots. So to your point, the current regime didn't draft John Simpson in the 4th round. That was the Gruden-Mayock regime when they loved their Clemson players, right?
Right.
Now they bring in Parham, who's their top draft pick this year, and because they drafted him, they may be more motivated to get him in the starting line guard over John Simpson. Even though I felt like right now John Simpson's the better player, Parham has the higher upside. And I've said on previous shows that Parham's easiest pathway to a starting spot is at guard because he started his career at Memphis at left guard, moved to right tackle, and then moved to right guard. So it makes sense.
It does. It's a natural position for him. And to your point, listen, like everything in life, there's a little bit of politics. If you hired somebody and at your role at your job, and it's somebody you picked, you went through the interview process, you invested in them, you're just going to have a little bit more faith and invested in that person, right? So it's just the way it goes. It happens in sports all the time when you have a changeover at coach, when you have a changeover at GM. So great points there, Mo. Okay. Let's move on now to former GM, Rick Spielman from the Vikings. I don't know if you saw this, Mo, this week, but he did a video around Cut Day on Tuesday where he talked about his biggest regret. His biggest regret as a GM, and he went ad nauseum talking about it, was cutting the Raiders' now kicker, Daniel Carlson. And I thought that was really cool because I think, a lot of times in the business, people don't want to admit their mistakes. Now, here's a guy who was let go, so he's got nothing to lose, I guess. And so he talked about it and said, look, it's always hard to cut, especially veterans, right? Veterans who've been in the community, been part of your team, have been huge in the locker room. And they talked about Daniel Carlson, who they drafted, they brought in. He started off really well. He had the one bad game where he missed 2 field goals against the Packers in overtime, and then he found himself on the street, which has been a godsend for the Raiders. But I thought it was nice to see some openness from an NFL executive and to talk about a player that they really regretted letting go. And it's not very often that you hear it being a kicker.
Yeah, it's just very interesting. And as you said, some GMs or a lot of GMs won't admit their mistakes even after the fact, even after they've moved on. But it was cool to hear Rick Spielman say that and the Raiders to benefit from it. But I believe he had 1 year with the Vikings. And I know it was a big game against the Packers and a crucial moment. And the Vikings have had kicking problems in recent years. But to cut the guy after a poor game, to me, is a bit hasty, especially in his first year. It wasn't like Daniel Carlson was with the Vikings for a few years. He was a rookie at the time, 5th round pick. And they just had no patience for it. But hey, I'm sure the Raiders fans and the Raiders aren't complaining about it because now they have one of the best kickers and one of the best special teams units as far as kicking, long snapper, and punter are concerned. One of the best special teams 3-man units in the league. So kudos to Rick Spielman for letting him go.
Yeah.
And kudos for the Raiders previous regime for picking him up.
Yeah. Raider fans, you want to send him like an edible bouquet or something and say thank you? Go ahead and do that. Mo, before we get to the break, by the way, after the break, we're going to come back. We're going to talk some fantasy football as we usually do on Thursday. Kelly Kriner is going to join us. We're going to talk about the Silver and Black Today Fantasy League and be able to kind of get an update on that. And I'm sure there'll be some trash talk, especially with Kelly because his favorite word is trash. But we're talking about the game tomorrow, Mo, real quick. Again, 3rd preseason game. There's some guys fighting for their life. Talk to me from your perspective coming on this game. We all know we're watching the offensive line. We're watching Alex Leatherwood, watching some of those moving parts. We're watching the interior of the defense on the line there. What else? What should people watch for? A couple things that in your mind we need to see tomorrow night in Las Vegas before this team gets to final cuts.
I'm looking at the depth in the front seven. I know I made a comment about Darren Butler. I no longer think he's going to make the 50-man roster after watching him closely and watching his snaps over the past couple of days. He misses too many tackles. And I don't think the Raiders are going to be comfortable with that, with a linebacker in the middle of the field who could let a ball carrier or a receiver go for 15 yards down because he slips off of a tackle. Luke Masterson could possibly sneak onto the roster, so I have my eye on him. Tashawn Bauer, who I think has had one of the best preseasons of any Raiders player on the roster, he could make the roster. I know Raiders fans are going to bring up LaTroy Lewis and say LaTroy Lewis had a good preseason, and they let him go. But Tashawn Bauer has spent time under Josh McDaniels, so he has some Patriot roots there. So I think he can actually make the roster. Understated player, could be finally finding his way with the Raiders on the outside. The Raiders do need some depth there along with Malcolm Coots. So I think Tashawn Bauer sneaks onto the 53 and not Darren Butler. So if I would look out for a player that's underrated or not talked about a lot, Bauer is the guy.
There you go. Now, did I curse Darren Butler by wearing my Arizona State hat a couple shows ago? I don't know. We'll have to. We'll see. Maybe he ends up. Maybe he'll sneak through and he'll end up on the practice squad if he doesn't make it, and they can develop him. We'll have to see on that one. All right, we are now going to take our final break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Kelly Kriner, who was going to talk fantasy football with us, and we'll see what else he's got to say as well. And something tells me his wardrobe will be something that Mo will enjoy. So we'll take a look at that when we come back here on Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Do us a favor, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating. We would appreciate that. Make sure on YouTube also, subscribe, hit the notifications bell so that you are notified when we have a new video. We'll be back right after this. Don't go anywhere, Raider Nation. Welcome back. Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Thanks for joining us, Raider Nation. We're in the home stretch, and this segment, we're talking fantasy football. The Silver and Black Today League, just a few weeks away from kicking off, and Mo's ready to get beat. Right, Mo?
Not.
And to do that and to talk fantasy football, we always bring on our good friend, my former co-host here on the show. And that, of course, is Kelly Kriner, who joins us now from Las Vegas. You can follow him on Twitter at Rating the Draft. And Kelly, welcome back, man. I noticed that you had your Got Sources t-shirt on, which Mo has also had on this show as well. Did you guys hook up and Mo sent you his XS t-shirt, or what happened?
Well, I don't know how long Mo's had his, but I actually looked at I bought mine on May 23rd. So I've had mine for a minute, just to let everybody know that, yeah.
Okay, I got you. So
I'm the copycat. He's trying to say I'm the copycat.
No, I'm saying I didn't copy from you. I mean, it's a great shirt. Everybody should have one. I'm just saying that I didn't buy this because the great Mo had one.
Kelly is the fashion plate, so he's keeping us all into the fashion game here, as you can tell if you're watching. So we're happy with that. I'll take my cues from Kelly. Kelly, before we get into the fantasy football, I got to get your opinion. You know, Mo and I on the show talking about the Raiders camp ending yesterday on Wednesday, the Patriot practices, what we've seen. There's been a couple reports out that now maybe the Raiders are shopping Alex Leatherwood. You and I have done some draft shows together on the radio where we were shocked by the picks that John Gruden made. This was another one. What's your thoughts on Leatherwood, if he can be salvaged as a guard, or is this a situation with, despite the money, the Raiders could say goodbye either via trade if somebody wants them or just letting them go?
I mean, I think at this point you're going to have to try him at guard, because you can say that you're shopping somebody, but I can also shop the 83 Buick that I have that's on blocks in front of my house. If nobody's willing to buy it, then you're not really shopping it. Oh. You know, it's like who's going to pick him? Who's going to trade something of, and when I say of value, even a pick swap to take up the contract with the way he's looked in the past? You're basically, man, it's a sunk cost at this point. To my opinion, you're trying him at guard, and if you know what, if he doesn't work at guard, then next year it's, you know, go for, you know, if he doesn't work next year, you're probably cutting him, or you're taking him like, hey, one last chance. Because with the contract being what it is and how much they owe him, you know, I mean, give it a shot.
Yeah. Well, Kelly, you're a draft guy. You study the draft more than anybody I know. There's always somebody else out there who wanted him, not where the Raiders took him, of course, but there's somebody out there who likes Alex Leatherwood for whatever reason, because of his talent, because of what he did at Alabama. When you look at him, does that play as if there's a guy out there, somebody who runs an NFL team, a GM, a scout, whoever, that may have liked Alex Leatherwood coming out of college, might that be the type of person who inquires about him?
Well, I mean, there's always somebody out. Like, they liked Alex Leatherwood because they saw what he did at Alabama. You don't like Alex Leatherwood because you saw what he's done with the Raiders and in the NFL. So, but there's always that coach out there that thinks that guy's not using him right. I can fix him. So there's always going to be someone out there that thinks I can, they screwed up. It's, it might be partly his fault, whatever. But there's always a coach that thinks if I get that guy, I can make him great like we thought. So there's always a chance. I'm just thinking that once you factor in the contract and everything, you're not going to get enough, in my opinion, to just basically say we're done with this and pitch him. Dude, keep him on the roster. You can never have enough offensive line depth. Even if he's not a starter, if someone gets hurt, you can throw him in. He's a body. You're already paying him. So at this point, it's like I don't see what someone could offer you that would legitimately get offered that you're like, okay, let's make this trade.
No doubt. Good stuff, as always, from Kelly. There we go. All right, we're going to shift to fantasy football now. So Kelly, and Mo and I were talking earlier in the day, and there's been some movement with the NFL rosters, not just the guys who got cut, but there's been some starters named. And let's start off, Mo, with what you talked to me about earlier this week on Wednesday. You mentioned, as we were prepping for the show on Thursday, you mentioned the Baker Mayfield situation.
Yeah, Kelly's probably gonna cringe his teeth at this, but I would say the Carolina Panthers pass catching group gets a slight upgrade with Baker Mayfield. I'm not saying it's a major upgrade where you're running out to go get Robbie Anderson at all costs and Terrence Marshall. But keep in mind, Baker Mayfield played with a torn labrum for most of last year. And he's had a couple of good years with the Browns. As long as he's healthy, he gives those Panthers pass catches a slight bit of a boost. But what I really wanted to bring Kelly on the show for was I want to know why Kelly treated Evan Ingram like he was Alex Leatherwood and wouldn't want to offer me anything for him. Kelly actually went out and got Isaiah Likely, who's the Ravens standout tight end from the preseason, to fill his tight end spot. And I had been offering Kelly Evan Ingram for weeks. Kelly ignored me, and he went out and he got a preseason star. Explain yourself, Kelly Kriner.
Uh-oh.
Well, if I wanted Evan Ingram, I could go get him off the scrap heap because you pitched him like an old newspaper. There's like maybe a 15% chance that Isaiah Likely's my starter in my fantasy league week one. Just the way he's looked in the preseason, he's like, especially in deeper leagues, might be like a viable kind of, he might be viable to like, if if you're hurting for tight end or anything. I just picked him up because, we've still got a week before, anything can happen. We see injuries in camp all the time. If something happens to Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely is an automatic top 10 tight end. So figured, it's not costing me anything to pick him up. It's not costing me anything to put him on my roster. And Isaiah Spiller that I dropped he's out for week one on top of not doing anything in the preseason. So I didn't really give up anything to pick him up.
So before we move on from the tight end conversation, Kelly, I'm just going to do this one more time. Austin Hooper, my tight end, my backup tight end, is available if you're looking for a tight end before week one. Offers are out there. I'm willing to listen to any offer you got. Just put it out there. Austin Hooper, by the way, playing pretty well, has a rapport with Ryan Tannehill. So if you want a tight end, I'm still open for business.
Wait a minute. Is the Vince Lombardi of fantasy football, is he now trying to make a deal on the air?
Hey, man, any way you can get it.
Well, it's funny because Austin Hooper was actually a guy that was on the free agent wire that I was looking at to possibly pick up when the season started. But I've got 3 or 4 options, and I will I'll give a conservative estimate. I'll probably have 4 tight ends by the time the season's over with. Because when I punt tight end, I'm basically streaming tight end all year. unless I pick up somebody that happens to hit or something. So, yeah, I'm not really that concerned about my tight end position. Now my kicker, got to get a kicker too. That could be tough.
So, Kelly, go ahead, Mo.
Really quick, Scott, when Austin Hooper racks up 988 yards and 12 touchdowns, we want to rewind the tape back to this episode. Kelly's going to regret not taking the offer because, as I said before, Kelly, the price today is not the price tomorrow. It goes up every day. So I'm just saying. That's my last piece on that.
Well,
yeah, kind of like the price of Evan Ingram went up and up until he's now free.
Oh boy. But here I am. I'm looking right now at the league. I'm looking at the transactions in the Silver and Black Today League, and it's Evan Neal before Zod, which is Kelly's team. It's Mostradamus, Gully's Gashers, which is my team. It's fun. We are the ones all picking people up, dropping people, although mine was just a kicker. You also, Mo, picked up a running back. You want to talk about your running back?
Yeah, Gus Edwards, I picked him up simply because, yes, I know he's going to be out to start the season. But if you watch the Ravens for the past few years under Greg Roman, he's going to use his running backs. He's going to run those guys into the ground. I know J.K. Dobbins is probably the lead guy. They got Mike Davis, who's probably going to be getting some portion of the workload while Gus is out. But once Gus comes back, he could push his way into that rotation and get some production. If then, it's like Kelly said, if there's an injuries pop up, especially at the running back position. J.K. Dobbins coming off a serious injury. If they have to slow him down for whatever reason, Gus Edwards is going to be a playmaker at that position.
And it also makes a difference because we drafted so early. Like we drafted 3 weeks before the season started. My team would not look like this if we drafted a week before the season started. And I'm sure you guys are the same way. You wouldn't have the same roster construction, but it's like, all right, I'm going to gamble on a couple things here, see what happens. Worst case scenario is I drop that and pick something else up.
Yeah. What other moves have you seen, or injuries? I mean, injuries are always a big part of this too, especially in the preseason. What have you seen, Kelly, happening out there in the NFL that could impact the guys in the league and the one gal, which is Just Win Wendy, shout out to her, that could impact the league and us getting prepared for the start of the season from a roster perspective?
To me, there really hasn't been anything that's happened yet that's had much of a kind of season-long impact. We've seen more of the issue in Washington with the Commanders about, Antonio Gibson, about how he's returning kicks, stuff like that, which maybe they're just trying to get him to help him hold on to the ball a little. The 6 fumbles last year were bad, but the 7 fumbles in his first 2 seasons is still less than people like Emmitt Smith, Walter Payton, and Adrian Peterson had. So I think that's getting a little blown out of proportion to where it's like, okay, we get it. Everybody wants the hot new thing in there. But the guy had 77 carries in college and you made him a running back. You're going to have some growing pains.
Yeah.
But what he can do with the football, nobody else in that Commanders team can do.
All right, Kelly. So when we look at our league, when we look at the Silver and Black Today League, clearly final cuts come up. There's going to be a lot of us with players that we have on a roster, even as starters, that we might have to then replace. So when you look at that and you look at cut day, how quickly is this transaction wire in the Silver and Black Today League going to go bananas?
Well, I mean, the fact that really the 3 of us are the only ones that have kind of done anything so far, that's not real surprising, because most people, when they draft their team, they got who they wanted. So, and like I said, it's been too early for there to be any big cuts or big moves, anything that's going to affect your teams. So it doesn't surprise me yet. But I mean, the first week of the season is always overreaction season in fantasy football, because every time that one running back or that one, wide receiver has a big day, everybody's going to flock and try to grab that guy. And there's only so many Anquan Boltons. There's only so many, I tell you what, if Sammy Watkins is on the roster for the Packers, which I kind of doubt he is, you can almost pencil him in every year for having a monster week 1 and then sucking for the rest of the year. If Sammy Watkins is on a roster, he's going to have a big week 1. People are going to flock to grab him, and then 4 weeks later, he's going to be back on the free agent wire, because that's what Sammy Watkins does. So yeah, before the season, I don't really like. Before the first weekend, I really don't see much. It's always after that first week where overreactions kick in, and everybody's got to have the new hot toy, man. Everybody's got to have that new thing.
No doubt. Guys, what about, I know not in our league so much, but in a lot of leagues, people de-emphasize certain positions. They go grab guys they want, to your point, Kelly, people they like to have on their roster. And so you're sitting there without the quarterback you want. You're sitting there without the running back or wide receiver you want. When you look at the preseason and how some of these players have done, the second, third tier guys at those positions, is there anybody who sticks out to either one of you that might be a good get for some of these people in the other league? Because we're not going to let people in our league get them.
Somebody that wasn't like somebody that's still a free agent that would be a good get.
Correct. Or a trade opportunity, you know, because I think I hate leagues where there's no trades happening. Now, again, you don't just trade to trade, but if there's value for value and somebody needs somebody and you have a spot to fill, then hey, maybe you look at a trade. Is there anybody out there that is worthy of that right now, especially going into week one where we don't know much?
Like something like that, it really, like, you kind of just have to look at each team and each roster, because most of the time people they'll either go kind of running back heavy or they'll go kind of wide receiver heavy when they're drafting their team. So it's like, okay, this team needs a wide receiver because they have 5 running backs, or the opposite of that. So you kind of just have to go, when you're looking especially for a trade partner, you kind of have to go the other way to where it's like, okay, what does this person need? What do they have that I want? And another thing that I do, especially like with the roster that I have now, before the season starts, I'm a big fan of, like I said, not drafting a kicker, not drafting a tight end, getting other players, because now I'm going to throw a 2-for-1 out there, knowing that I can't keep the number of players that I have anyway. And if there's a guy that is doing well that I'm probably going to have to cut anyway, if I can add him to something and trade him to somebody else to make the deal look better, knowing that I was going to cut him anyway, it's just that much better in the trade market.
Yeah.
I let Kelly answer first because I wasn't going to answer. I actually have my eye on a guy. I actually tweeted about him a couple of days ago. I don't know if Kelly saw it. He might have. He was actually in one of my recent Bleacher Report columns. I'm not going to say it on air because I know if this goes out to someone in our league and listens to our podcast, he will be picked up. I'm not saying Kelly would do it because, as Kelly said before, he's not going to pick a guy based on another person's advice. He's going to do it if he wants to do it. But I guarantee if I say the guy's name, he will be picked up within 24 hours after I say it. But I wanted to ask Kelly a question about his roster. Maybe he wants to tip his hand on this or not. But is anyone on the roster that you're looking at right now on your roster where you're like, what the heck was I thinking drafting this dude? Because I know you, as you said, we drafted early. So, you know, preseason hasn't happened yet, injuries settling in. Is there one guy you're like, man, I made a goof there, or what was I thinking?
No, because as chaotic as my draft might look, and like I said, I'm looking at it as I'm winning or I'm 12th. That's all I cared about. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a couple, like, I've got several wide receivers. The running backs that I gambled on, the young running backs, they're not panning out right now. So, I mean, it looks like I may have missed on those, but I mean, that was part of the plan. So it's like, yeah, it hasn't worked out. It may not work out, but that was what the plan was that I set forth, you know. And the one thing, especially with a wide receiver, everybody likes the number 2 wide receiver on teams. When there's a team that there's a definite number 1 that might not be as sexy, but he's the number 1 guy. I have 3 number 1 wide receivers on my bench. So it's like, if any of them, like Kadarius Toney could easily be a top 12 wide receiver next year. He could easily be a top 12 CFL receiver next year. We don't know. But it's like, he has the ability to give you a wide receiver 1 year. You know, Christian Kirk is he could be like the new Robert Woods, because he's going to get hyper fed. It's going to be ugly. He's going to be Christian Kirk has a chance to be the garbage man of all garbage men, because when they're down 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and they just got to throw the ball, he's going to get hyper targeted. It doesn't matter how you get the points as long as you get them.
Isn't that trash man, Kelly? Not garbage.
Oh, wow. I screwed up.
You haven't said trash in the whole show. I'm very disappointed. I had an over-under bet with Mo. No, I didn't. But
well, we haven't really hit anything to where I would actually, because you just can't throw that out willy nilly. It's because
No.
you don't want to take down the meaning of that. If I call somebody trash or say something's trash, it's from the heart.
Absolutely. I'll tell you my regret though is Mark Andrews. When I drafted him, I bought too much into the rankings, and there were other players there I think I would have been better off taking. To your point, because I strayed from my usual standard, which is I don't care about defense and I don't care about kickers and I don't care about tight ends. But I guess because I was in that position, I took him. So I wish I wouldn't have taken him.
I'll take him off your hands. I need a tight end.
I know. Clearly, you're on the waiver wire all day with tight ends.
It's funny you say that, Scott, because I'm starting to have not concerns about, not doubts or concerns, but just second guessing myself about getting Travis Kelce. And I may be falling into the preseason hype of Patrick Mahomes throwing 2 touchdown passes to Jody Fortson. But I feel like it's possible that with Kelce going up there in age, Patrick Mahomes may use more of his backup tight ends. Now, I think Blake Bell got hurt, so he's not going to be playing. But Fortson, who's a converted wide receiver tight end, I'm not saying he's going to be Darren Waller or anything, but he may get some more looks than usual. So,
yeah. And we don't know we still don't know how that Chiefs offense. I mean, we've seen some in the preseason, but we haven't seen it in full force yet to understand how they're going to line up and how it's going to look. To your point about how he spreads the ball around now that they switched it up. So good point. But
just don't give the points to Sky Moore, please. We all know why.
Well, it's funny, Mo, because I'm kind of on the opposite side of that. I think that Kelce's the only known thing you have in Kansas City now, to where if you're keeping a wide receiver in Kansas City, it's going to be basically, roulette every week who has the big week. But Kelce's going to be consistent until you carry him off the field. So I think, if I was him, I mean, I wouldn't worry about him if I were you. But if you want to trade him, holler at me.
He's ready. He's ready to take him off your hands.
I won't say which pick it was, but if I would not have been at work drafting, I would have thrown something in my house because I missed out on somebody by 1 pick. Now, if you go through there and look at it, it's probably going to be pretty easy to see who it was. But yeah, if I wouldn't have been at work, I would have thrown something.
Well, there you go. Kelly Kriner, talking fantasy football, amongst other things. Kelly, we always appreciate it. And we're going to have you back on, obviously, more regularly, but we got to get to the season. So we'll in a week and a half or so, when we get ready for that week 1 matchup, we're going to get together. We're going to talk matchup, and then we will start to have some of the other players in the league join us when we see some of these matchups and some of these games and how the head-to-head unfolds in the Silver and Black Today League. So, buddy, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Anytime.
All right, there you go. Kelly Kriner with us to end the show, talking some fantasy football, Mo. You and I have a little bit of shopper's remorse on 2 tight ends. See, tight ends, man. It's like I gave it too much. I gave it too much thought. I gave it too much credence, the rankings. I was buying into it, and I just should have just went with my gut and said no tight ends.
And the point that Kelly brought up is the point why I drafted Travis Kelce to begin with, is because he's the only surefire thing in Kansas City as far as their passing game is concerned. If anyone's going to rack up the points, it's going to be Travis Kelce. But like I said, I try not to be a prisoner of the moment, but just seeing him throw to Fortson out there, and I started to think, okay, what if they start using more 2 tight end sets? What if Fortson has a bigger role than I thought? Kelce's getting up there in age. I believe he's 32, 33 years old. So, not that I have buyer's remorse, but a little nervous about his numbers because I remember I drafted him in the 2nd round, so I'm expecting 2nd round return from him.
Yeah, and watch, he'll go out and get 180 and 3 touchdowns in week 1, and then you'll be like, oh, see, I was brilliant taking Travis Kelce. So it all works out. That's how fantasy football is. All right, Mo, we're going to wrap up the show, but we will be back tomorrow. Friday, we have a mailbag show. We're going to release that in the morning, both on YouTube and, of course, the audio version. And then Friday night, after the Raiders take on the Patriots at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, we will have our post-game show, Mo, myself, and, of course, Murph from Raiders Fan Radio with the voice of the fan. So make sure you join that. So 3 days in a row, lots of Silver and Black today, lots of Mo, lots of Scott, lots of Murph, and you got your Kelly. That was enough of Kelly for the week, wasn't it? I don't know. I don't know.
The fans love Kelly.
They do love Kelly. He's lovable.
They do.
He's lovable. I mean, it's Kelly.
When he starts talking betting and fantasy football, the people love him.
Yeah, we're going to talk the next time we have him on to talk about fantasy, though. We'll do a little bit of a longer segment and we'll talk some betting because that'll be pre-week 1. Now, Kelly bets on the preseason because he's that way and he knows what the hell he's doing. But we'll talk about going into, so we'll talk about some more wagering when we bring him on next time.
Scott, if Kelly could, Kelly would bet on a joint practice if he could. Trust me.
Oh, that's a good one. All right. Mo, I'll see you tomorrow, my man.
All right. We'll talk Raiders, and I'll be on Alex Leatherwood Watch from here on out.
You will be. All right. I appreciate you guys all being with us again today here on Silver and Black Today. Again, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on the audio side, wherever you get it. If you're on Stitcher, you're on Apple, you're on Google, doesn't matter, Spotify, you can get us there. Do that for us if you would. That helps us out a lot. And the guys in the suits at Odyssey love when you guys download the show. So please do that. And that helps us out significantly. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube, we had a great YouTube crowd on last night, big one, and for us, and we had great conversation there as well, and as we are now too. So appreciate that. Hit subscribe and also hit the notifications bell. For Moe Moton, Kelly Kriner, I am Scott Gulbransen. This has been Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Take care of one another, and we'll talk to you next time.